This is episode 42 of That Shakespeare Life.
So hi, I'm François Larocque, Emeritus Professor of English Literature and Early Modern Drama at Université de la Sorbonne Nouvelle, Paris 3, Paris 3, and I'm the author of Shakespeare's Festive World. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. So it's That Shakespeare Life with my friend, Cassidy Cash.
The very simple fact that breakfast wasn't actually heard of in medieval times, and it was only beginning to be something taken up by the people in this late 16th century. But it was in the Elizabethan times that other people started to have breakfast too. What they all ate and had in common was that they all had bread. The rich class would have had a bread called manchet, but I reckon Shakespeare would have been more likely to eat a kind of bread called cheat bread.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
Even William Shakespeare had to eat. We laud Shakespeare as a man who helped reinvent the theater industry, someone who would pen some of the greatest lines in all of antiquity. But what did someone like that eat for breakfast? It certainly wasn't Wheaties powering that legacy, so what kind of foods did Shakespeare enjoy? And did he even eat breakfast? Here to help us explore the daily eating habits of the Tudor period, including people like William Shakespeare, is a guest who knows more than most about the daily lives of Tudors since she leads an exploratory experience at her beautiful Tudor home. Brigitte Webster is the owner and founder at Tudor and 17th Century Experience, a unique living history center with authentic accommodations that let visitors step back in history to experience life in England's 17th century. Offering designated open days, taster days, weekends, and custom-made holidays, Brigitte's unique home lets guests travel back in time and fall in love with 17th century English history. We are delighted to have you with us here today, Brigitte. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So what would Shakespeare have eaten for breakfast?
Right. Now, we all know that we know very little about Shakespeare to start with, so it's even harder to predict or know for certain what he would have eaten for breakfast. But the very simple fact that breakfast wasn't actually heard of in medieval times, and it was only beginning to be something taken up by the people in this late 16th century, makes us able to form an educated guess, really. The facts that we have is that traditionally it was just children, old and sick people, as well as pregnant women who were entitled to breakfast. But it was in the Elizabethan times that other people started to have breakfast too, such as working people, travelers, and even the rich classes did enjoy some form of early meal in the morning. What they all ate and had in common was that they all had bread. Different types of bread, depending on your standing in society. The rich class would have had a bread called manchet, which was a small round loaf made from the finest white flour. But I reckon Shakespeare would have been more likely to eat a kind of bread called cheat bread, which was just a little bit of a lesser quality, but very common, especially in the middling class.
So that's cheat, like, could you spell that?
Yes, it's cheat like to cheat somebody. It's quite bizarre.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes. What is interesting is that in the late 16th century, the immigrants that we had coming from, in particular, Holland, introduced the English to a new fashion, and that was eating butter with bread. Until that point, the English actually had lard, which is a type of animal fat, on their bread, but not butter. Butter wasn't very common in England because when you have cream, then you have to make a decision. Do you use the cream for making cheese or butter? And the Dutch loved their butter, but in England they had cheese. So it was only in the late 16th century that with the Flemish workers, people started to look and say, oh, that looks interesting. You know, butter on bread, how fancy. And it coincides with this new fashion of having breakfast, that this new trend to have butter and bread started to go hand in hand.
How fascinating. So Shakespeare and his family could have been one of the first families to be doing this in England.
Absolutely. And it seems that the richer households would have added rosemary or sage to the butter to make it more interesting, or possibly also to make it more medicinal, because it was very, very important to the Elizabethans that whatever they ate had to be healthy. They were very health conscious. They didn't always get it right, but they definitely wanted to live healthily.
Well, where did they get the food? I mean, could they only eat what they grew themselves, or was there like a grocery store that they went to?
Right. It very much depended on where you lived. In London, you had a lot more choice. You could basically go and buy food pretty much any time of day until it got dark. You could even go and get something like I call the Elizabethan takeaways, which were basically meat and cookery shops that sold ready-made pies or tarts, sometimes pottages, which is a form of soup, very thick soup. Or you could go and buy food which was grown locally around London from various markets, or even small shops. But the food shops were very, very small to what we know. And but it would have been fairly fresh. And London was pretty much the only place where you could also buy exotic type of food, where you could buy exotic fruit, such as lemons, oranges, pomegranates, exotic spices, and most interestingly, wine. Wine came into London and not to any of the ports. So all the wine first came into London and then was transported to places like Warwickshire or York, but it made wine very, very expensive. And that's one of the reasons why only the very wealthy had wine and anybody else had either ale or beer.
So the individuals didn't necessarily have to travel to London to get their food. There was being delivered to Warwickshire from London?
Yes. It took about 2 days on horse from London to Stratford, for instance. They did have early form of coaches by the time Shakespeare died, but it was obviously very expensive to ship anything that was very heavy from London to Stratford or any other place. And that's why a lot of food products that came from London were really only affordable to the very rich in living in their country homes, not to the normal middle class living in towns like Stratford.
So when Shakespeare was fixing his meals, when he was preparing them, I forget that only here in the southern United States do we use the word fixing to mean prepare. So let me change that. When he was preparing his food, how did he do that? Did he fix his own, or did he have house servants, or would it have been his wife? I know he traveled between Stratford and London, so it might have even been different depending on where he was at.
Yes, there was probably a huge difference, because we need to bear in mind that in Elizabethan times, men did not cook unless they were well-known, very successful chefs. But Shakespeare, not being a cook, would not have voluntarily done any cooking.
Okay.
So he only had two options. When he was in London, he could have gone to have his dinner at the local inn, where there would have been a choice. They had choices between 2 or 3 meals. Or he could have bought ready-made meals from either street seller or, again, as I pointed out before, from those cook shops that sold Elizabethan equivalents of fast food.
So you would that was like a shop that you show up and you just buy the meals already there, and you
exactly.
eat it.
And it was mostly pies, because you could shove just anything into that pie and your customer wouldn't know what went into it. Yeah, so they did not have the best reputation. So I do believe that when Shakespeare went home and his wife Anne would have cooked and prepared stuff for him, he would thoroughly have enjoyed that, and it would have been much fresher, and he is most likely having lived a healthier diet while he was in Stratford, because in Stratford his wife would have used vegetables as well as meat products, where in London, having to rely on other people's cooking, I very much doubt he would have had enough or any vegetables at all, which obviously we now know is not very healthy.
Well, here in the US, there's a custom among working individuals. Like, part of the work day is to take what's called a lunch break, which is an hour during the middle of the day to eat a meal before returning to work. And I don't know if that happens in the UK, but I wondered if there were similar customs for this kind of lunch break in England when Shakespeare was working. If he's writing a play in London, does he take time during the day to stop and eat, or is it just, dinner?
Yeah, that's again very interesting, because it's my understanding that when there was a production on stage, so a play was on, that was performed in the middle of the day. Am I mistaken here?
But, no, about 2 in the afternoon, yeah.
Exactly. So I do wonder whether on days where he attended one of his plays being performed on stage, whether he actually had either a lunch pack with him or whether he had dinner out before or after. Now, normally dinner, which was the main meal for Elizabethans, was taken between 11 and 12 o'clock. That was pretty rigid. It's quite interesting because there are a few documents that point out that there were 1 or 2 individual nobility people who refused to have dinner between 11 and 12 and delayed it until 1 o'clock. And they were definitely mentioned for doing that. So it was very strict between 11 and 12 o'clock when they had dinner, which was the main meal for Elizabethans
of the day. Oh, now, you mentioned that Shakespeare's plays were performed at around 2 in the afternoon, and that was done specifically to coincide with before the sun had gone down, so that they had the light there at the Globe. But that practice led me to wonder how Elizabethans cooked dinner, because if, dinner is an evening meal, was it at night when they were fixing it? How did they see? Was their whole kitchen lit with candles, or how did this work?
Yes, that's a very interesting point you're making, because in times before electricity, the only means of lighting your kitchen was really with either a candle, which was extremely expensive, or rush lights. and they were not suitable for any kitchen environment because they were tremendously smelly. I mean, it was oil made from animal fat, so you can imagine if you light that, the stench is pretty awful. So really all the cooking had to be done and finished before it got dark. Now in the winter it gets dark here in England at around, on a really, really gloomy day, it gets dark around 3:30.
Wow.
So exactly. On a sunny day, maybe 4. So you can see why their supper, which was the evening meal, had to be really finished by 4 o'clock. So when then your husband came home, you could quickly make him sit down, eat his supper, possibly at candlelight, and then go to bed. The other problem that Londoners had was that the gates, the city gates were closed at dusk, which means if you were working inside the city walls, you had to make sure you left through the gates before they shut them for the night. And that's why...
Oh, you couldn't get home?
No.
Wow.
You would not be able to get home if you missed that time slot when you could get out. Yes. And I believe that one of Shakespeare's problems in the beginning was when he actually didn't earn an awful lot of money, because he wasn't quite that famous then, was that his lodgings were based outside the city gates, where he worked inside, just inside what the city gates were. And people were sometimes stuck inside the city. Yeah. So it was one of the other complications they had. But I believe that is one of the reasons why supper was not as excessive as dinner at lunchtime, simply because there wasn't that much time to do the cooking and to actually eat it before it got dark.
Well, were meals communal affairs? I mean, did people ever eat with their friends and neighbors, or was it all just a husband and wife and their children eating together?
Right. Very good question. Again, like today, I think it very much depends on your personal situation, where you are, whether you have elderly people, mum and dad stay with you, or whether you were looking after somebody in the neighborhood. But generally, it was just a family affair, except for Christmas time, when people, especially wealthy people, were encouraged to invite people who were less fortunate to come and have dinner with them. But generally, it was just really the family. That means husband, wife, and the children, and possibly, exactly.
Well, recently I had family from Brazil visit us, and one funny difference in culture that we experienced was that they eat every meal at a table with placemats. And my family, typically, we eat breakfast and sometimes even lunch as this grab and go affair. Granola bars, you just grab it and you might stand, or you're eating it on your way to something. And it was a real change for them, which led me to want to know whether Shakespeare had a similar custom for the format of how he ate meals. Did he sit at a table and eat for every meal?
Right. Again, with Shakespeare, it's so difficult to really make any kind of observation, because he really led two totally different lives in London from the one at Stratford. At Stratford, he would have led very much the family life, which means that he definitely would have had to sit down with his family and enjoy the whole process of eating dinner or a supper, where I believe that in London he would have been your typical workaholic who possibly did not take the time to sit down. Maybe he did on a rainy, cold winter's day, that he went to the local inn, sat down, enjoyed his pint of ale together with a hot, warm cooked meal. But in the evening, I think it was more something that he possibly grabbed some bread and a chunk of cheese and ate that in his lodgings, which would not have provided him with any means of cooking. So no kitchen or anything to actually enjoy a hot cooked meal.
Well, Brigitte, this is fascinating, and I know we would love to learn more about this topic. What are your favorite books or resources that you can recommend for us to learn more about Tudor eating habits?
Right. There are so many. So that was the most difficult decision I had to make. Which ones am I going to suggest to you? Now, the first one I have chosen is a household account cookery book by a lady called Lady Eleanor Fetty Place. This book was first published in 1604, and I've chosen her simply because I like her recipes, but she also did know Shakespeare in person. She was a family friend, so we know for absolutely
Oh my goodness, you're kidding!
That she knew him. And the best thing is you can actually buy that cookery book today, because a lady called Hilary Sperling edited it and in 1986, and you can buy it on Amazon.
Oh my goodness.
So that is my first recommendation. And the second one is called The Shakespeare Cookbook by Andrew and Maureen Dolby by the British Museum Press. And I've chosen this one because it combines everything a Shakespeare fan who wants to tap into cookery of that period needs. It is written by consultants Joanna Holloway and Daniel Mayers, which I respect hugely for their in-depth research on Tudor food. It gives you sections of general information on food of the period, together with direct links to the Shakespeare plays. It has a lot of historic pictures and etchings, which I like. It's always nice looking at pictures. And it has a good selection of authentic recipes together with their modern take on it. So if you're very confident and you want to recreate something really authentic, then you can do that. If you are a modern cook who's not that confident, you always have the modern equivalent, which is usually easy to cook. So
do you prepare some of these recipes there at the Tudor and 17th century history experience?
Not just some. All of them.
All of them, okay.
I am a lady who's very confident living in the 16th century, but I sometimes need to be kicked screaming into the 21st century.
Fantastic. Well, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I am supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible. So this choice would be in addition to those.
Right. There's only one, and I would love to show it to you because it's massive. It's very heavy, and it's a 17th century original book. So you can imagine how big and heavy it is. And it is called Gerard's Herbal from 1597. It's a reference book on plants. And I was given that 2 years ago as a special birthday present by my husband, and I just love it. It smells like something that's 400 years old.
Oh, how much fun.
It feels like something, and it's fascinating stuff. What I find sometimes a bit frustrating when I do research is that, unlike modern books, the plants are not listed in an alphabetical order. So you really need to know whether the plant you're looking for belongs to a certain group or family in order to find it.
Oh no.
And take you sometimes hours to find it. But
when it smells that nice, you don't mind spending hours with it, right?
No, that's true. And I took the time once to photograph every single page and make a modern copy, so I will be able to
you can digitally search it. That's perfect.
Yeah, I did.
Well, what's next for you? What are you working on now that you're excited about?
Right. There are always many, many things, but for 2019, I've decided I need to welcome the 21st century into my business, and I will start a blog on Tudor cooking with live cookery lessons, so people can watch me do whatever recipe they'd like to see how it's done. I will also finish my Elizabethan garden. Last year I finished my early Tudor garden, and this year finally, hopefully, I'll get the time to do all the rest of the digging and planting and finish my Elizabethan garden for all my visitors to see the difference. And big secret, we might fingers crossed, even be able to move the business into a 16th century hall. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed big time. As everybody knows, moving house is very stressful, and whether it's all going ahead. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that we will succeed, but that would be my biggest dream come true.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, Brigitte Webster, owner and founder at Tudor and 17th Century Experience. We will keep all of our fingers and toes crossed for you on the 17th Century Hall. And please keep us informed about your blog. When it launches, we would love to talk about that and share it out on cassidycash.com. So make sure you keep me in the loop about that, because that sounds fabulous. But thank you so much for being here today. This has been a really fun conversation.
Thank you very much. It was a delight and fun for me too.
Brigitte recommends some fabulous Shakespeare resources in today's episode, and to see links to those, as well as to find out how you can visit her 17th century experience, check out today's show notes. All of the resources, as well as places to learn more about the guest, are always put in today's show notes, along with history tidbits related to the week's topic. So even more information about what Shakespeare would have ate and drank for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in Tudor England is all available in the show notes for today's episode. Find all of this at cassidycash.com/episode 42. That's cassidycash.com/EP42. Don't forget, you can support the work we do here at That Shakespeare Life by shopping at cassidycash.com and checking out the link to our sponsors. That's it for this week here at That Shakespeare Life. I'm Cassidy Cash, that Shakespeare girl, and I hope your week is a Shakespeare-filled week.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.